You are live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. This is the third meeting of the Building Energy Code Working Group. It is Thursday, August 21st, a little after 1 o'clock. And I'm Scott Campbell, I'm chair of the committee, and maybe we will start by going around this room quickly and just introducing ourselves and I think, do you take attendance from online? Is that how you do it?
Ben will be doing that, yeah.
Ben will be doing that,
So,
off of the recording.
right.
Okay, all right. Well, we won't need to introduce the folks online because we can see your names now. Anyway, so start with Senator Bongartz.
Seth Baumgart, Senate District.
Sandy Midstream, architect, representative for AIA Vermont.
Kirk Peltier, representative from Vermont Housing and Conservation Board.
Keith Levinson, Department of Public Service.
Mike DeRocher, Director of Fire Safety. Peter Tucker, Vermont Association of Realtors.
And the folks in the room?
Lori Holt, real estate broker in Montpelier with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Vermont Realty Group.
Okay.
Tom Bursey, president of AIA Vermont.
Okay. And
Tim, introduce yourself.
you're the last one.
Tim Heaney, Realtor here in Montpelier.
All right, terrific. All right, well, let's get going. I guess first is approval and discussion of meeting minutes and also any adjustments to today's agenda. Would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Anybody? Okay. Mr. Tucker? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any discussion about that? Okay. All right, recap of the first two meetings. These meetings are monthly, and I know I tend to forget what happened in the course of a month, so I thought it would be useful to kind of talk about where we are and why we're here. So I wrote something up in order to be a little more succinct than I might be if I was rambling. So this is the third year of a Building Energy Code Working Group or Committee. In fact, it's the fourth year if you include an informal off-session group that I convened in 2019 with many of the same folks. Without a formal administration, with a single authority having jurisdiction, along with enforcement mechanisms, it's incredibly difficult to conjure ways to increase compliance with energy codes. Yet, in the current environment, with construction costs at what likely is an all-time high, the housing shortage has been building for decades, homeless crisis, and a political climate biased against regulation, this is where we are. The last 2 years' work, and last year in particular, has made it abundantly clear that energy codes are not just about energy efficiency. Common practice today includes higher levels of insulation and tighter construction than 10 or 20 years ago. Problems arise when builders don't fully understand the dynamics resulting from that, especially moisture management issues. One of the documents that went out to the committee before this meeting was an article that showed up in my inbox this past week from Building Science Corporation about managing moisture issues that plagued Canada and then the United States and now Europe, as they realized that, oh, gee, we're adding insulation and making buildings tighter. How do we manage the moisture? So energy efficiency is really the caboose to this issue. The salient issues are indoor and environmental quality, which are really health and safety issues. Occupant comfort, also direct connection to health. Structural durability, which are really economic viability and sustainability issues. And then also efficiency, which is also economic viability and sustainability. The trajectory for improving construction practice is also abundantly clear. Vermont needs a residential building code administered where all the other building codes are administered through the Division of Fire Safety. Energy codes are part of building codes and also need to be administered by the same agency as the authority having jurisdiction. Codes must be enforceable, whether through a consistent system of building permits or contractor licensing or some other method. The hurdles to implementing such changes are likewise abundantly clear. While it's entirely within this working group's remit to recommend pathways towards enforceable codes, legislation to do so is not likely to succeed this coming year. Architect and builder representatives in this working group whose colleagues are most affected by the implementation or lack of implementation of codes have put enormous effort into developing and refining strategies for the working group's consideration. Whether these efforts garner unanimous support or not, they have been tremendously helpful and deserve our thanks. As chair, I really appreciate their engagement. This is a legislative working group, however. The takeaway for the legislature is identifying legislative actions that can further the charges in Act 151, which created this working group. First among these is improving compliance with energy codes. Number two is developing plans for transitioning energy codes to Division of Fire Safety. And third is considering whether Vermont should adopt a residential building code. I'm paraphrasing, stating those charges verbatim. As a practical matter, to be successful, legislation for next year has to focus on changes that enhance voluntary RB's energy code compliance. Generally, I think the focus has to be on mechanisms that strengthen incentives for residential contractors to seek training and certifications. In broad strokes, I think that includes at least the following: leveraging OPR's residential contractor registry and voluntary certifications. So it's the registry is mandatory, but certifications are voluntary, to greatly increase public awareness and of mandatory contractor registration and energy codes. Both of them are mandatory. That's number one. Number two, moving responsibility for administering voluntary certifications for the builder registry from OPR to DFS. Number three, specifying improvements to OPR's residential contractor or builder registry. Maybe that's not legislation. Number four, establishing a timeline for Division of Fire Safety to adopt a residential building code and assume responsibility for energy codes. And fifth, clarifying requirements and timeline for updates to energy codes. So just a quick recap of the previous two meetings. This is the third meeting. Meeting number one, we heard a great presentation from Energy Futures Group about its US DOE grant to develop and implement a building code administration plan, BCAP, very much in support of the same goals that we have as this working group. EFG outlined three potential implementation pathways. One, essentially continue with the existing efforts, which are mostly voluntary and incentive-based. Two, develop a group of energy professionals to assist contractors with energy code compliance through consulting, site visits, and diagnostic testing. The third possible pathway was directing DFS to adopt a residential building code for public buildings and assume responsibility as the authority having jurisdiction for energy codes, to include ultimately enforcement capabilities. Unfortunately, the new federal administration has chosen to cancel EFG's grant, and while they're seeking funding elsewhere, BCAP cannot continue to implementation without additional funding. Meeting number two, we heard from OPR about the status and challenges of the residential contractor registry. The registry's purpose is consumer protection. Registration is mandatory, though no standards or credentials are required. engaging in a construction project in excess of $10,000 without registering is a violation, punishable by the same sanctions as practicing any licensed profession without license. However, enforcement is complaint-driven, and without widespread public awareness and acceptance, it appears that many contractors continue to work without registering. OPR is also tasked with developing voluntary certifications. Rulemaking for that is still in process. Various improvements to the registry, notably creating an up-to-date website with sorting and filtering capabilities, are hampered by a lack of resources, funding, and staff, and their current IT contracts. We also heard in meeting number 2 from Division of Fire Safety regarding possible adoption of a residential building code. Again, competing workload and lack of staff and resources is a problem. DFS was awarded a FEMA BRIC grant, which stands for Building Resilient, and I can't remember what it stands for, to support the effort to adopt a residential building code. But again, the new federal administration canceled the grant. The Attorney General's office joined a coalition of states suing the Fed, but that's, you know, how long that's going to take. Still, the Division of Fire Safety intends to move ahead with adopting a residential code by rule, but it will be on a slower timeline. Lastly, in meeting number 2, last month, we heard from the Public Service Department about the next RB's and CB's compliance study, which they undertake every 3 years, that is set to begin imminently. The study report will be completed by early spring, and a draft may be available by the end of next year. Lastly, in meeting number 2, we heard from PSD's General Counsel about a quick overview of the legal standing of municipalities to enforce building code, or rather energy codes. DFS currently has agreements with 11 municipalities, I believe that's right, to administer and enforce building codes, the fire and building safety code, which applies to public buildings. But it appears that without a central authority having jurisdiction, no such delegation of authority to municipalities for energy codes, no such delegation of authority exists. So that's a quick wrap of the last couple of meetings. Today, we're going to hear, I think, some very interesting testimony from the field about how Arby's works in the field, Arby's in particular, how it works in the field. From real estate agents, thank you for joining us. We have some written testimony from a lobbyist for the insurance industry. We're going to hear from Samantha Sheehan of VLCT about impacts on municipal clerks, from property inspectors, and then also from PERS raters and residential contractors. So with that, I think we should get going with, well, we have Lori Holt, who's going to give us some testimony about her experience with Arby's. Sure, thank you.
Thank you. For the benefit of the people that are online, and I don't know how much this group knows about the Montpelier Energy Ordinance time of sale requirements of sellers. That's what I was asked to talk about today. And so I'm just one of those instructional people that needs to start with a little history to bring people up to speed. The city of Montpelier back in 2018 passed an ordinance, the Montpelier City Council, to eliminate fossil fuel use within the city entirely by 2050 and replaced with a renewable energy net zero goal was adopted at that time. And as part of working towards that end, the city mayor, Ann Watson at the time, was a big advocate for having a time of sale ordinance that would require people selling houses to provide an energy profile showing what their house would likely use for energy for the buyers to be able to make an educated purchase. So they have a partnership with a company called Clearly Energy, which is a climate policy analysis company that owns climate management software with proprietary algorithms that are kind of baked into it. So that when a seller wants to sell, they need to go online to this Clearly Energy software and fill out some blanks, which for many sellers is kind of over their head. The city held public meetings, listened to public testimony regarding whether they should do this energy profile, ordinance or not. The software is available for people wanting to go on and figure it out, start playing with it to see what their house might use in the course of a year. Just for some numbers, I look back to when the ordinance actually started, which was July 1st of 2022. I've sold 9 houses within the city of Montpelier as listing agents, which needed to have the energy profiles done. And out of those 9 clients of mine, only 4 were able to do the software and to make it function to the point that they could get an energy profile printout. I provided like 15 of these, which
Yeah, there's more here if anybody needs
if
some.
anybody needs any. Because I didn't know if you'd actually ever seen what one looked like. This happens to be the one on my house that I've been working on for 3 years. I've gone in several times. Every time I have a client who's spent all weekend working and not having the software do anything but not save their work and provide a sorry, something went wrong, or error 503, which it did twice to me yesterday. So I still had to contact the people at Clearly Energy, asking them to provide me with a copy of my printout because I was unable to get it to function all the way through.
So you just quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but so you finding the software is really buggy?
Yeah,
It's not just that it's difficult to understand, it's just buggy.
it doesn't seem completely functional all the time. Based on my clients who, some of which don't have computers and have relied on their nieces to fill them out for them. And others have come into the office and we sit down in front of a computer and try to get through it. But our experience for the most part has been for people filling them out and getting a printout, the energy stuff is way overstated. I had one on Elm Street in Montpelier that said it's gonna cost $9,000 a year for the energy for this house. And they have, 20 years of history where they didn't use 1,000 gallons a year on it for oil. So, but it's mandatory. And if from day one, when our listings are posted online, there's supposed to be an energy profile attached to it. Looking through the city of Montpelier's 16-page information guide on this easy program, it says that there'll be assistance at the city level for someone who can help them through, or they can just contact the technical services through Clearly Energy to make it work.
Okay, well, so I guess I would ask, we're not really talking about the labeling, the Montpelier's labeling requirement per se.
Well,
We're wondering about the impact of Arby's, the residential building energy standards, which are mandatory across the state,
sure.
on customers, buyers and sellers, in general. So do you work outside of Montpelier also?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
we go
Yeah.
45 minutes in every direction that's sensible.
Yeah.
And there's some private markets like Stowe that just don't make sense for us to go up there because they have their own little niche.
Yeah. So I guess I wonder if you could really.
Sure,
address
if I can pivot over,
Yeah.
over my prepresentation.
Okay.
I mean, basically just to finish that off and move on to
Okay.
your question,
Okay.
was that out of the 200 and 73 single-family residential properties that have sold in Montpelier since July 1st of 2022 through our MLS. There has been less than 50% compliance with having these energy profiles attached to their listings. And that's including 70 sales that all of the documents attached to the listings were scraped off after closing, because there's some firms that just do that. And so it was impossible for me to do anything but make the assumption that maybe they all had compliance, which is doubtful. But, and even now, there are 42 active and under contract single-family residences in Montpelier in the MLS database. And right now, there's only a 14.3% compliant group. So aside from that, as far as buyers and sellers and energy codes, I mean, the inventory has been so limited for the past 5 years that the amount of people who drill down to the fact that, well, how many gallons of fuel and what's my electricity bill going to be, doesn't come up on the top 20 questions. If there's a house and it's affordable to them and it's available, they want it and they'll figure it out. I mean, as it is now, we're required to provide them with a brochure, which is also in that packet, which has been a mandatory requirement on, how your houses use energy. That basically just says an insulated house is more comfortable to live in. It will cost you less. They get utility information from most listing agents provide that, as well as on a seller property information report. So I'm not of the thought, or my experience has been that rarely the cost of energy to have a house doesn't come up much. It used to, because there were banks that actually would qualify buyers at a higher ratio of debt to income. If the house was energy efficient, they could stretch the numbers a little bit because they wouldn't be using so much fuel. But clearly the inventory has been so slight that has been the least of people's worries for the most part.
And we intend to hear from a banker. We'd hope to hear from a banker, a person representing the banking industry
Sure.
at this meeting, but unable to be here now. Some people take vacations in August. I don't understand it. And so we're looking forward to hearing from them next.
Yes. So I don't know that I have a lot of testimony to give on specifically on code compliance and such. I'm just part of realtors is to monitor what legislation and ordinances are being proposed, because we're all about people's right to own property,
Sure.
and enjoy the peaceful use of it themselves. So do you have any specific questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So it sounds like, sellers, as I recall from last time I sold a property, there is a place in a listing agreement for sellers to provide information about energy usage, about how much fuel they used, what their electricity bills were, things like that. Do you typically get that information from sellers? Is that?
Yeah, there'll be cases like foreclosures where the banks won't even rely on the address they give you being accurate. And so there's not a seller disclosure regarding that. And with estate sales, if you've got an executor that doesn't have any firsthand knowledge of the property, they're not anxious to fill it out. And there's actually a local attorney that tells sellers not to fill out the seller disclosure anyhow.
Yeah.
And even if they've lived there for the past 50 years, because they just think it's a bad idea.
I have a couple other questions. I'll see if anybody else has questions, but another question is, do RBs, in your experience, do RB certificates get found by closing attorneys, buyer's attorneys?
Those are the ones that need to be recorded
Yes,
for newer homes.
yes.
I find very few of them in the land records.
Find very few of them.
But there's not a whole lot of new construction in Washington County per se, compared to our old stock.
And do lenders ask about RV certificates at closing to the bankers?
It hasn't been my experience.
Yeah, okay.
It hasn't been, as far as I know, it hasn't been considered a title flaw if it's not there. Some
It's
attorneys will press
not.
for it.
No, it's not. We did talk about that some years ago, and the representative of the Banking Association was adamant that that is not a good idea.
He has a question on
Okay, I guess my last question is, well, I'll let these guys go first, and then I'll ask my last question.
Hi, thanks for coming. I was just curious, when you said, have you noticed how accurate or inaccurate this report is from the data that you, like, a lot of times you'll have, like, you said this is your home here and it's showing 259 CCF of gas. Is that?
We don't have natural gas at our house. I didn't put that natural gas was there, but that's how it came out.
Really?
And actually,
That's not good.
filling out some of the blanks again yesterday, it asked me if I wanted the option of putting in the gallons of oil that we use or the cost. And generally, we'll always ask our sellers to put the gallons in because there's so many different fee schedules and pre-buy programs, and we happen to qualify for wholesale pricing because we use so much oil at our house, which is an advantage, but
Sounds like you could use a little energy.
but
efficiency.
it didn't, I have a husband from Florida, but ultimately, because I asked for the ability to put gallons of oil, then it wanted me to put kilowatts for my power. You know, it's like, my husband pays that bill, he shreds stuff. You know, it's like, I just want to know, you know, so I was trying to get a hold of Green Mountain Power yesterday to tell us what we use, or actually Wash Electric, but ultimately, the people that were savvy enough to fill these out on their own have the ability to input their own real numbers. But if you don't, or you're having, you know, your niece help you fill it out, then the algorithms just kind of take over. And those are the ones that seem to be way out of whack. But it doesn't change the fact that we have to have them attached to our listing.
And I know that, just a second quick question, and you said obviously there's bigger fish to fry in the market. People are concerned about other things. And I think everybody knows that, but the purpose of this legislation, I believe, is just to get it out there.
Sure.
It's informational purposes. So this little pie chart, it was designed to make it easy to understand. Are people, notwithstanding the glitches and obviously the lack, maybe there's some lack of accuracy, but are people finding this helpful at all? As far as the simple presentation?
I mean, it's pretty, you got a colored picture, but I don't know that people really focus
just
on it
don't
much
care.
because even the one that had a $9,000 energy attached to it,
Yeah.
it never came up. It's like, what's
Really?
with that? Because they had the real numbers, you know, from many years and the gallons they used and said, it's just an ordinance, we have to have it here.
I see.
You
So
know,
people are looking, I know when I bought many houses and built houses over the years, so I have historically look at the bills.
sure,
So people are still doing that and they care, and that's all they look at.
that's.
They're not
that's
finding
all
this
they're-
helpful.
That's generally all it
Got
comes
it,
up, is
okay.
like, do you have how many gallons it
Thank you,
uses?
thank you.
Well, Chris.
So I guess, my assumption is, to your point, people are just so relieved to find a house they can afford.
Yeah.
They know
I
that
mean,
they
and-
can
and
button
maybe
it
they're
up.
gonna, I would imagine they're gonna look more, is it in a flood hazard area or something or not, as opposed to, you know, because I know when we sold our house, right, I called Coda and I got how much oil been used. And then I can, we got Green Mountain Power, imagine a buyer, that's what they were most interested in, but they were also probably more interested in the fact that it was a house that was available.
Sure.
So I mean, is that kind of what you were saying about, like, the role? I mean, interesting information, but that's not gonna be the deciding factor.
It's not, it doesn't seem like to me it's been a deciding factor. I think that people that aspire to own their own properties buy them because they can pull everything together to afford it. And sure, it'd be nice if you could button it up and make it, you know, take care of itself. But ultimately, you also have to, you know, feed your kids and get them to school and get them clothes and all the other things that a household has to look at to prioritize, you know, without paying for, you know, an energy audit and a consultant to come in to give you costs of things that you can't afford to do right away.
And just to your point about, so, I mean, I came out of a builder and realtor family, and I mean, my dad built spec homes, and then he did a lot of custom builds. And I imagine there's not a lot of spec housing being built. I imagine most of what's, I mean, what would you, I don't know, I guess, because what I'm thinking is, you may not be seeing RV certificates because I'm just guessing a lot of the newer homes that are probably getting built or not, or custom builds, not
Right,
spec housing.
right. We
So
see
you-
the lot sale come through, but we don't know what they actually have into the house until
Right, so until you resell that.
they
you're
resell it
probably
and
not
then it
gonna-
goes into the open market.
And I only bring that up because, I mean, that may also get, like, just the reality of what's getting built versus, I mean, the multifamily versus the single family detached. And then, when you were talking about newer construction, of course, there's also been the newer additions, so we don't, you know, so there's all that
Which also
too,
requires.
but that's just another, to me, it's just another factor, like the real impact of this.
Well, for Washington County, newer construction is like 1985 to
Yeah.
1990. Tim can speak to that because his family did some developing, but there's just not a lot of new neighborhoods specifically.
I'm Windham County, so it's even worse.
Yeah. All right, well, we should,
There's one.
oh, was there one more? I'm sorry, Sandy, go ahead.
Lori, it's good to see you here. You've been doing realty for a long time.
40 years.
And just casually speaking, not any kind of conscious analysis, but in the buildings that you've handled, either relatively new construction or older construction where maybe there's been remodeling in the last 20 years, could you say there's any kind of trend? Have you seen more defects in the envelope? So by envelope, I mean window failures or around window failures, problems with mold on the outside or the inside, insulation failures. Has there, or has it been a flat line for you?
Well, I've seen where houses are built so tight that unless they have a ventilation system set up, you get condensation on the windows, you get mold around them. You know, and that's its own problem that's created, you know, and now the home inspectors are saying that, you know, the spray foam insulation that they recommended around the sills and all, you know, is a health hazard if your house catches on fire. So they want that all sheetrocked in basements now. And if you go down, there's a lot of old stone foundations that, you know, they've just plastered with that foam. It's not drafty, but, you know, creates its own headache for people and worry.
All right, well, thank you so much, Lori. I really appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
Tim, could you come on up? Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice to follow Lori because she covered all the key points, I think. So Tim Heaney, and basically I've grown up in real estate in Montpelier, kind of like Lori, actually kind of worked together for a long time. My experience, my family was kind of a builder broker family too. And so we've had some experience in new construction. I think we were initially asked to talk about the Montpelier experience with our home energy profile and started to kind of look at that process as Lori did. And I agree with everything she said about it. And as I worked through it and talked about it with our team, it seemed like the focus shouldn't be on all the little mechanical flaws within this, because this is not a success story. The key is how to do something that's going to work and make it meaningful. And I feel like some of the questions you asked were really good about, you know, in terms of a recent sale I had on Friday in Montpelier, which we had to work through, a young techie couple that still was not able to do the online form. We had to connect them with Clearly Energy to do it, to be ready to close. And that's a house they had done extensive work on to make it energy efficient. They took off the siding, put all new rigid foam around the exterior, resided it, got rid of the fossil fuel supplied heating systems and put in heat pumps, did a lot of really good things, made it very efficient. And in this model, it shows the property using a lot more than it actually uses. It was like 4,700 a year range. And in real life, their experience with their real life power bills has been more like 2,400 a year. But when you throw it into the algorithm and it runs through, this is the result we get that we have to give to buyers. At the same time, we are routinely using the seller property information report. It's not required, but it's the realtor version of a seller disclosure form. It's widely used, and it's been used long enough that educated buyers are requesting it. If it isn't given to them up front, they ask for it. it's a good piece. And within that, those are the questions you asked about with your energy use, electric, backup fuel, all those questions are here. I find that's the piece buyers look at when they're making their decisions. That's the real data from the seller to them that they can say, okay, I can handle that. Or maybe we'll burn more wood and less, that's their choice. But so I think the system is here if we use it well already. I think this system is kind of another layer. And I appreciate it. I've been other places like in Europe, this is normal. You go by real estate brokerages, if you walk out and look at real estate offices in other places. And in the windows, this is part of the presentation on every list. And it's almost the same form.
I've seen those things in rentals in England, for example.
Sure.
Yeah, they post them.
But at some level, I don't see us getting there, at least in the reasonable future in this country. And I think this tool really works. So it might be a way, you've got to think about the number of layers and how many things are put on the housing process. Whenever anyone wants to improve something about making housing more affordable or making the real estate process better, they add more forms and another layer. I had a closing the other day with a couple that were not first-time home buyers, and the attorney had to go through over 100 forms at closing with that they had to understand and sign. And that's the normal closing if there's a bank involved. And so every time we add another layer, so in this case, we added another layer, there's actually a certification form that's supposed to be signed at closing by the buyers and sellers saying that the buyers received the form from the sellers. It's just one more thing. And when they're working through this many layers, it doesn't become meaningful. It's just like, how do I get to the next form? And so you're really losing the impact of it. It's not effective. So I guess that's my quick take on this without getting into the mechanics of why Montpelier's not able to do it as well as maybe we should. And in terms of the RBES piece, it's been in play for a long time, as you know, and we've built a number of condos and properties, and I believe all of our contractors were supposed to have met the code and put the stickers on the electrical panel and done the pieces. But I know a lot of homes we handle, that's not there. You just don't see it.
And do buyers ask about it at all outside of Montpelier?
No.
So they look at the seller's disclosure, but they don't ask about RB's forms.
I don't think they even know to.
Yeah.
It's not normal. As a question goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Once in a while, a really aggressive attorney who may be newer at it, we'll bring it up.
I just wanted to comment that Amanda, my wife, and I purchased a home in a Hayden subdivision in 2002, I think it was, and built in 99. It was probably, as Lori said, that's really new construction in Montpelier. And we have the sticker on the box, and I was actually impressed that it was filed in the town land records.
Mm-hmm.
When I ran my energy profile on my house, just when this first came out, you have to be a resident to use it, right? I mean, you got to be in the city of Montpelier, you got all the property. I was surprised that it didn't pick up all the components of the RBES, because it's just pulling public records, but not all public records. I think the lister's card was kind of how that worked. But, our seller's information report, it isn't mandatory, but as a buyer's agent, generally, if you don't get one from the seller, you put it in the contract and then it becomes part of the contract and a requirement. So,
the disclosure form you're talking about.
Yeah. And it is, it's more than energy profile too. It's all conditions in the property, and, we feel is factual. That as opposed to an algorithm, these are the actual costs of ownership.
All right. Well, question, Chris?
So you're in the business and maybe you probably read trade journals and things. So what I'm beginning to wonder is I could see where the RB's implementation and like a report like this could be really effective if I was in, say, Houston, or where I used to live in Northern Virginia, or even Southern Maryland, when I had a choice of 50 homes to look at, or a lot of them were the same. So it's almost like looking at what engine choice do I have from among Subaru Outbacks? Am I going to go for greater efficiency, greater power? What are the trade-offs and benefits, right? So if I'm looking at McMansions you know, in a field someplace and they're all basically the same, or even townhomes or whatever. But, you know, there's a difference in square footage, maybe there's a difference in heating system, and then I can say, yeah, that's the one because it's gonna save me more over this, yada, yada, yada. But that's not our context here. And so I'm wondering if kind of the theory and practice or because it feels like a lot of what we've tried to pursue is really, it's noble, it's well-intentioned, it's good in theory, but the actual practical effect doesn't reflect the actual Vermont. It just, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be, but it's like, but it almost feels like we're taking concepts and not necessarily tailoring. But I guess, I don't know, what's your perspective on that, or what's your, because efficacy is important to me, because my challenge is, from a policy standpoint, is if you take a really well-intentioned thing, but the execution is bad, it turns people against the well-meaning concept. And then you have a longer road to hoe, if the execution fails.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I'm just trying to, I guess my take on, I think you're right about the car analogy with different engines and different, and most of our housing stock, as you all know, it's old. I mean, we're dealing typically with old, you know, pre-1970s homes in all of our communities. So it really becomes a piece, to me, it's like, how do we help guide people for their future and their new home? And at some level, the past is important and they can see what it's using, and that's key. But really, most people come in and they're always going to change things. They want to make it right. And we're seeing so many people trying to convert to adding heat pumps and doing all these pieces, which in brand new efficient homes, they're terrific. And those homes are built for that. But the older homes aren't. And so you'll find well-meaning folks coming in and investing and finding they've got to upgrade their electrical service to be able to handle the heat pump. And there's layers that go with that. But there's also key insulation pieces that should be happening. And I guess my take, trying to answer your question, is how can we encourage or educate them and help them to get to their next place, to get it to what it should be? Because if you put in a heat pump and you don't do all the rest of the things, and then you start getting $600 and $800 a month power bills in the winter, maybe that's not what you had in mind.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Two real quick ones. Do you think, like, don't the realtors, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the issue was like, this requires that the buyers see it. And in reality, you guys are saying, I know when I bought, the disclosure usually happens, but it's not required to happen. So do you think it could be required to happen?
The
Like
seller's property
The
information.
seller's
report.
property information report?
You know, we kick it around every once in a while. So far, you know, there hasn't been, you know, real push to do that. There hasn't been a requirement to do that. I know when I sold my dad's property in New York State, the contract was like 15 pages long because it had every disclosure under the sun within the contract. So,
Right.
and that'd be, you know, the way to do it. But, you know, we have found, you know, that most buyers agents doing their due diligence for on behalf of their buyer. If it's not there, they ask for it as part of a condition of the contract. So, you know, I think we're getting it, you know, in most cases, Lori's point that, you know, there are going to be bank foreclosures and trustees that don't have knowledge.
Right.
But even then, the seller's information report has a, you know, do not know category to check off on.
Yeah. Well, we don't have time now to get into, thank you. We don't have time now to get into like, is that a path or not a path, and why that industry is the way it is. But if that was the case, and it was always done, do you think, Tim, that it would be better to have, you know, one way I could see like maybe a more useful process based on what you two just said is that this thing is not very useful, it's not very accurate, people aren't using it, it's creating more paperwork, is just have the disclosure report and then have some information sheets that people get that show this is what an old house, typical old house does, how it performs. This is what a new house typically performs on a square foot basis. Something that could be created by Efficiency Vermont or whoever, EMP. Would that be useful to people?
They
Because the
created
problem
those
with what,
pieces, and they exist.
the problem with what you're saying is this doesn't tell people a relative analysis. They
Right.
get an idea, like people don't know when they see those numbers, they don't really know if it's good or bad.
It's not Energy Star.
It's not, yeah, they don't really know. It's not Energy Star, exactly. So that's my question. Would that be add another layer to get people, the whole purpose of the policy, I think, is to get people to start to make more decisions on, make informed decisions on energy stuff.
It's an interesting challenge because Efficiency Vermont did create some pieces about home efficiency that are part of our standard packet, the realtor forms that are supplied. I don't know how often they're actually used, but because we also did the same thing with lead-based paint
Yeah,
and other issues. Everybody's got all these helpful brochures and pieces.
yeah,
As it is, a contract now is over 15 pages in Vermont too. And when you work through all the paperwork, it just takes hours to go through it with folks. And if you add even more layers, it just beats them into the ground. It's
Okay.
constructive. But the pieces are there. And I think on the spur, it's just to follow the evolution of that. So it was, when it came out a few years ago, kind of a helpful hint, nice way for sellers to share information about their homes, not a required form. But as it's evolved just in the market and in the process, because more and more real estate agents are including it as part of a contract within contract language, it takes on a whole new weight.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
part of a contract, and that is really a common piece right now, which I actually talk with sellers about when they fill them out to understand. This is not just a helpful hint. It's gonna be legal and important, so get it right.
All right, well, thank you, Tim. We have to push on because we're already
Thank you
running
for
behind.
extending the time.
Yeah,
Sarah.
sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for both of you for coming in. Really appreciate hearing from you. So next on the list is a written testimony from the insurance industry, written by Jamie Feehan, who's a lobbyist for the industry. And I'm not going to go through his entire testimony, which was sent around to all the committee members, and I believe it's posted online as well. But I'll just read one paragraph that I think sort of gets at the nub of the matter. I forget what APCIA stands for, but anyway, the industry understands that residential building energy codes, while perhaps a subset of broader building codes, have a primary purpose or goal of focused on energy performance and efficiency, reduction in energy use, and thus possibly saving the homeowner money in the long run on related energy or reduced energy costs. While the homeowner and the insurer may also benefit from a more durable building envelope and better ventilation, the more direct nexus to perils and risks more commonly addressed in the homeowner's policy is less evident. And it just seems to me that that Jamie and perhaps the insurance industry in general is missing the point. While energy codes have the word energy in them and are focused on energy efficiency nominally, in my mind, they're really about the overall performance of the building as an energy system, having to do with health and safety, comfort, durability, and moisture management in particular, that are really the focus of the issue in terms of how does the building operate and how do people live in the building and how long is the building going to last, and in that respect, it really is a consumer protection issue as well as an issue that should be of concern to the insurance industry and the lending industry as well. So anyway, since Jamie's not here to rebut that, I think we will just move on and try to catch up with our agenda. Let's see. Next, we're going to hear from municipal clerks and Samantha Sheehan, who is online with us. She's going to give us a little information about how the Arby's system works from the point of view of municipal clerks. So, Samantha, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me in the room?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So my name is Samantha Sheehan. I'm the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. The league represents or all 247 municipalities in Vermont are a member of the league, and all municipal officials are members. So that includes elected, appointed, and municipal staff. So I also just want to be clear, clerks and treasurers, whether elected or appointed, are members of our organization and are so represented by us through our advocacy work, but they also have a separate professional association, just as town managers do, the mayors do, water resources departments do. But VLCT is sort of the one-stop shop for municipalities for advocacy, but also we run a municipal property and liability insurance pool. We have attorneys, experienced municipal law attorneys who provide free direct consultation to municipalities. We have a municipal operations support team that provides advice and insight on issues related to municipal finance. We offer a breadth of trainings and informational sessions, workshops, webinars, online resources for all manner of municipal administration, and the list goes on. So that's what the organization does. And I'm happy to talk to you today about some various aspects of municipal regulatory authorities related to building and construction and land use broadly, and then answer some questions that were sent to me in advance related to RB's processes specifically. So I'm gonna screen share. I have a short PowerPoint. I'm not gonna read. I just sent the request to screen share. If someone can allow that, please.
Yeah, you should have that capability now, Samantha.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay. And you can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I can't do it in that mode, or I can't see you. Great. So, I guess I want to start briefly with an overview of where. So when we all say building code, municipal building code, what we really mean is municipal ordinance. And so I'm actually going to go upside down on this slide. So municipalities may adopt policies that administer the sort of internal processes and roles of various municipal officials and how they interact with each other and state and local compliance systems. So for RBs or building permit fees and enforcement, this is like who receives the paperwork and what do they do with it once they receive it from the member of the public. That exists in policy. Building code is ordinance. In order to have ordinance related to building or any manner of land use regulation, you must have zoning and bylaw. And in order to have zoning and bylaw, you must have a municipal plan. All municipalities are granted all of these authorities through state law as they relate to buildings and land use decisions at the local level. But many municipalities do not have local regulation, which we'll talk more about. So the way these regulations are created is through a citizen-led process that requires actions of the legislative body. So typically, bylaw and ordinance may start with an advisory body. So this is like your planning commission, which is a citizen body that advises the legislative body. The legislative body is the council, select board, board of aldermen, etc. And the authority to create, amend, and adopt local regulations rests only with the legislative body. We do have two municipalities, Burlington and Rutland, which are a strong mayor, strong council form of government. So much like our governor, the mayor in those cities can veto or sign the ordinance, but it is adopted by the legislative body. The appropriate, what the law calls the appropriate municipal panel, this is most often the DRB. That is a lay board, although it is appointed of citizens of that municipality that meet certain minimum professional qualifications as prescribed in charter or law. And they are the quasi judicial body and the appellant venue for local regulations. And then there's an administrator. Most often the administrator is a municipal employee, and most often that employee is the zoning administrator. But municipalities in Vermont have a number of different roles and departments of permit and inspection, departments of planning and zoning that administer building code and building permits and to conduct permit enforcement. And so that could be a permit technician. It could, the roles and responsibilities related to code and enforcement could be shared among, inspectors, permit technicians, compliance officials, zoning administrators, and more. Or in a small, lower resource community, there may be just one zoning administrator that does it all. But I would point out clerks are not involved in the local regulatory systems. Only the clerks file the land records. And so the clerks receive RBs and file them in the land records as required by current law. But they're not typically involved in the administration or enforcement of local building code.
Sorry, Samantha, you're gonna get into action, oh, sorry. No, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
I'm looking at this on screen too, and it's saying I'm muted. You're gonna get into how RBs is handled by the town clerks. I mean, I think that really that's the focus of our interest here, rather than other regulatory structures in town government, except that municipalities that have building departments and have an agreement with Division of Fire Safety to administer building codes, that's another sort of separate issue, because most municipalities don't have an agreement with the Division of Fire Safety to administer building codes.
Yeah.
So really, I think our focus here is about how towns and municipalities are handling the RB's certificates, whether they're receiving them. They're probably issuing some sort of application or something when somebody comes and gets a zoning permit. And are they getting them back? Are they filing them? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so sure. So I'm gonna skip past these middle slides, but they just explain the various and robust statutory requirements in the creation, adoption, amendment of local code. But so the sort of package of questions were about the differences between permitting and non-permitting towns, how permits are managed alongside RBs or not, and also fees and costs. And so I think to understand that, the picture I'm trying to paint is that all municipalities have regulatory authority. Most municipalities do not have. Let me pause there. So in understanding like the volume, so we have, if we look at this slide, we have 247 municipalities. 200 of them have a municipal plan. 142 have adopted zoning and bylaw. And so only a maximum of 142 municipalities could have building code. And then for those that do, oh, I'm missing a slide. Am I? Shoot, I'm missing a slide. But they could, so of the municipalities that do have code related to building, that may or may not apply to all types of construction. So it may be new construction only, it may be habitable space only, it may be interior, exterior only. It could apply to aspects of energy code, and many municipalities do have that for electrification, thermal, and weatherization. But even within those regulations, it may not apply to all types of building. It may be commercial only, residential only, only above a certain square foot or floor area ratio. In speaking generally, all of those systems are administered outside of the clerk treasurer's office through a separate and like prescribed regulatory system that starts with the advisory panel and ends with the administrator and has appellate and enforcement functions. So when we're understanding how Arby's is really on like a separate administrative path, because the clerks are required to accept the Arby's certificates and file them in the land records. And so that's happening just separately from so when we're talking about non-permitting and permitting municipalities, the process for Arby's is no different. And then when you have permitting and non-permitting municipalities, they may contract for some of their enforcement actions, including inspections, with the department. But in asking about the fees associated with that and the costs and whether the costs are covered, that is managed the same way, which is fees are created by ordinance. So in order to have a contract with DFS, there still has to be building code. And then the building code ordinance sets the fees. And those fees may not be set at a level that they are producing income for the municipality. They have to only cover the incidental and related costs for administration and enforcement of the ordinance.
Okay. If we could, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we could just drill down on the Arby's a little bit more. One of the proposals that we're considering is moving the filing of certificates at the state level to Division of Fire Safety, which is in the process of adopting a new data management system. And one of the questions is, when we have a centralized repository for the RB certificates, do you see any need to continue filing these certificates in the town land records, or is that become redundant and unnecessary? And is there some sort of transition process that you would see if we followed that path and centralize the repository in the state office?
Yeah, so VLCT supports moving the filing requirement to a state agency. Our recommendation is not as specific as to say Department of Fire Safety or not, but it's to say we support ending the requirement for town clerks to file the RBs, because town clerks have no relationship to the regulation. Like they do not have a role in the outreach, education to property owners or builders, or to the enforcement creation of the regulation in the way that municipalities have separate local regulatory authorities.
Do you see any
Um,
sorry, do you see any downside to eliminating the filing of certificates in the town records?
No. So there are a variety of records which state law requires clerks accept, file, administer, and retain. All of those requirements are different. It is the job of town clerks. I mean, that's what they do. They do dog licenses, marriage licenses, land records, the list goes on. So for us, the change in requirement is quite simple. Like, so I would recommend that in terms of legislative action, so at the time that there's clear legislative direction to place the requirement within the chosen state agency, it would be typical then to, in the same legislative action, require that agency make notifications to the appropriate municipal official, in this case, town clerks, by a date certain. And then generally, VLCT, we work hard and do our best to understand when those requirements are added, changed, or removed, and to educate our members on the change and the timeline for implementation of that. But when you're removing the requirement, it's really quite simple from our perspective.
So what would the town clerks do with that notification if a state office sent them a notification that a RB certificate had been filed?
No, sorry, not that just to notify clerks that they no longer are required to keep and file these records.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
okay, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm sorry, we really have to move on. We're running quite behind here. Did you have anything else to add quickly or?
I wrote down a couple notes as the other folks were speaking, and there's just one I want to be sure to point out. I think as the working group moves forward and considers the sort of nuances here of building energy code, it is true that in the past decades, the vast majority of new construction housing units permitted were single family homes. That is no longer true. So in each year since 2020, the proportion of new permitted units that are multifamily and multi-use has increased rapidly. And as of 2024, it's gone upside down for the first time in state history that we have records for, where the majority of new construction is multifamily. And the reason I point that out is because in the local land use regimes, although they vary significantly town by town, it is much more likely that a multifamily residential new construction project would, that local building code and energy code would apply. So I just want to point that out. It's just it's sort of a tectonic shift in the real direction of home construction and permitting that's happened in Vermont.
Well, that's very, very interesting. Multifamily buildings, of course, fall under the jurisdiction of the Division of Fire Safety since they are public buildings. So that's interesting. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, again, we really have to move on. Next, we have property inspectors to hear from. We got written testimony from Steve Duquette, which I believe was also sent around. I don't know whether I need to read this. I think everybody on the committee has gotten a copy. I think in the interest of time, we're just going to move on. I believe it's also posted online on the Building Energy Code Working Group website at the Public Service Department. Ethan Goodkind, I saw on the screen. Is he still with us? There, I think he's still there. Ethan, are you,
I'm here, yes.
available? So you were really here to talk to us about your experience as a HERS rater, but you're also a property inspector. And I wondered
Correct.
if you could just, a short discussion about Arby's from the point of view of a property inspector and what you're seeing in the field and among your colleagues in that specialty.
Well,
And then we'll come back and talk about HERS rating later.
Arby's certificates or the forms are supposed to be displayed inside the electrical panel cover or in the near vicinity of that. I don't see that often, if at all. But that's also, I got into HERS ratings a couple years ago. So as far as Arby's paperwork goes, that was new to me at that point. So prior to that, not looking for it. And I don't, a lot of the homes I'm in are not necessarily new construction that I'm doing a real estate inspection for. So if the house is, say, like 2020 and newer, I will look for that certificate to be in that electrical panel general area. And if it's not, I do inform the homeowner that they have a certain amount of time left to get that from the builder. And I believe it's 6 years to bring attention to that, or I don't know if they would go to court over it or something like that. But as far as the real estate inspection side, that's about as far as I get with Arby's.
Again, if I could just put a finer point on it, I think you said that prior to your becoming certified as a HERS rater, when you were just doing property inspections from that point of view, you weren't really looking for the Arby's certificate?
No, not whatsoever. Nope. And I suspect most property inspectors do not.
Okay.
I think it's maybe in the last couple of years, it's been more general knowledge, especially I don't know, there's another inspector on here. I don't know if he's into HERS ratings or energy ratings, but I think in order to survive in one industry, you kind of have to dip your toe in the other industry as well. And I think that's starting to happen. And that's where the awareness comes from. But prior to that, in the home inspection industry, there's no mention of anything like that because that's a state thing where we're not necessarily in the property inspection going off of only what the state has to offer. It's more of a national guidance.
Okay. All right. Well, great. I think that might wrap up our discussion of property inspectors, unless anybody has any other questions. Let's see. It's 2:18. Actually, we're only about 8 minutes behind. So we had planned to take a 10-minute break. Do people need to take a break? I could use a trip to the bathroom myself.
5 minutes?
Make it a 5-minute break? And maybe we'll stay on the YouTube, or not on the YouTube, on the Zoom call, but